Anyone ever attempt a citizen's arrest? If so, how did it turn out? I kinda made a citizen's arrest of a pilot from the control tower. Middle of the night, I was working a solo shift in the control tower at Flint, MI. A Cherokee 6 calls up, says he wants to taxi out and do touch and goes. Note, he had the airplane out of the hangar, running, and had already taxied a couple of 100 yards to the hold point, as is routine. He was slurring his words, repeating himself, had forgotten to turn his nav lights on, etc. Clearly in no condition to fly, and from the laughing and carrying on I could hear in the background, he'd brought some buddies with him. I was half a mile away in the tower, so really couldn't see anything. All I knew was what I was hearing on the radio. Technically, I had no right to refuse taxi or takeoff clearance based on that, but I tried to reason with him over the radio, told him it was too late to fly, that we had rules about noise at night, not true in those days. Just generally tried to talk him into putting the airplane away and going home. He wasn't having it, got belligerent, and kept insisting he was going to go fly whether I cleared him or not. So, I called a city maintenance worker and told him to park his truck in front of the airplane, while I called the cops. He did, then got out of the truck and ran when it looked like the pilot was going to taxi the airplane right into him. He told me later it stopped with the spinning prop just inches away from the truck. Cops finally showed up. Had a hard time dealing with the situation because the plane was still running. The pilot refused to shut it down, and the cops didn't know how to shut it down. They had a standoff for about 15 minutes, finally took the guy into custody. They said he was totally sloshed, had 2 guys with him that he'd only met in the bar that night. He'd been bragging that he owned his own airplane. They didn't believe him, and things went as you can imagine from there. I got a verbal attaboy from the cops that night, and my chief the next day, then never heard another word about it. Please note, incidents like this are very unusual. Most pilots are very responsible about having 8 hours from bottle to throttle. As a pilot I was sitting here shaking my head the whole way through reading this. Thanks on all pilots' behalves for stopping that man from flying, and for the disclaimer. Crap, I was reading all of these accounts and it just occurred to me that someone tried to enact a citizen's arrest on me a long time ago. I was homeless, living in my car and had stopped at a bookstore to buy a book. Without anything else to entertain me, I would read. Anyway, I didn't find the book I wanted, so I took a book from my car and sat on a bench opposite the bookstore to read. The manager of the store saw me reading and evidently thought I stolen the book, because there hadn't been a sale evidently in the last hour. Small shop. Instead of coming out and asking if the book belonged to the store, he walks up, snatches it from me and tells me he's called the cops and he's placing me under citizen's arrest. To which I responded, "Give back my freaking book," which he responded by grabbing my hair and trying to pin me down on the bench. To which I replied, "Get off me," and used a rock on the ground to smack his shin. To which he retaliated by falling on the ground and crying like Peter Griffin when he got kicked in the shin. I retrieved my book and heard the sirens coming, so I just sat back on the bench and told the butthole it was my book, not his. Cops come, handcuff me, then ask if I stole the book. Told him nope and had them look in my car where all the stuff I owned was, which was some clothes and 7 boxes of books. I like to read. The owner felt so bad. In exchange for me not pressing charges against him, he let me come in once a week to pick out a new book free of charge. That was a smart move, sitting back down on the bench. That probably went a long way towards the police believing your story. I used to work at a bottle shop in a pretty shady neighborhood. Every night I worked there we had trouble. Usually it was just kids trying to steal alcohol. I've had bricks thrown at me, guy come in with a screwdriver, etc. Anyway, one night a guy came in and tried to steal a bottle of whiskey. I caught him and booted him out of the store. About half an hour later he came back and I caught him again trying to put the same bottle down his pants. So again I go to kick him out. Unfortunately the owner was there and he had had enough, so he told me to grab him while he called the cops. Obviously this starts a massive struggle between me and this guy. Our bottle shop was attached to a bar. On this particular night we had a comedy night on. The struggle managed to find its way into the bar until I finally managed to pin this guy in the middle of the bar while some lucky comedian had the easiest set of his life. Anyway, the cops showed up and knew the guy by name. He tried to tell them the bottle fell into his pants. Then he told me he was going to come back with a gun and shoot me. Sweet job. First day back from college last summer, I was taking my little brother lunch from Taco Bell. Drunk driver ran a red light and caused me to T-bone him, pretty much mangling my car. I pulled over and watched his brake lights turn off as he released his brakes and took off. I immediately floored it and managed to get right up on his butt. Horn blaring. Every warning light on my dashboard flashing and trying to dial 911, all while thinking I'm going to have to pit maneuver this mother. As soon as 911 answered, the words came out, I'm in hot pursuit of a hit and run. Who'd he hit me? I'm chasing him right now. Before I could even give them his license plate number, the guy gave up and pulled over to the I still have the cops on the phone and he gets out of his car and I immediately yelled, get on the freaking ground right now, and waited for the cops to show up. They found 2 cold beers under his seat and a PCP, angel dust or whatever pipe in his trunk, and he got hauled off right away, and hot insurance bought me a new car. TL. DR. Drunk driver. Hit and run. Hot pursuit. Sent his butt to jail. Profited a new car. This is definitely the most bad butt comment in this thread. My first year working security at the hospital I work at, I was forced to detain someone. I was doing my rounds and as I approached the elevator, some drunk guy stumbles out and says, "This isn't the parking lot." He then turns around and goes back in. I followed him in. He was in the middle of closing one eye and jabbing his finger at the buttons. When the doors opened again, he stumbled out and yelled, "Where are my frickin' car keys?" That B took my keys. He then patted his pockets and pulled them out and yelled, "There they are." He smiled a crap-eating grin at me and stumbled out through the front door and into the parking lot. I sighed and followed him to the front parking lot. I mumbled, "Don't do it. Just be grabbing something really quick out of the car. Don't drive it, frick." He started the car and pulled out wildly and sped off. I only managed to get down 3 of the license plate characters before I lost visual contact, but I started walking in the direction he drove off in. I radioed communications to call the police and described the car. He apparently went the wrong way and got lost on hospital campus. Moments later he sped back the other direction going at least 50 miles per hour. The funny part was, he saw me, slammed on the brakes, and whipped around and sped past me again, giving me a peace sign. I got the license plate. He blasted past me again, still very lost, and parked near the ambulance entrance and left the car running. As I walked past the car I reached in and grabbed the keys. He was in the hallway near the when I got inside, and when he saw me, he darted into a bathroom and slammed the door. I walked up and held the door shut until the cops arrived a few minutes later. The best part? I didn't know it, but he had just become a father. That B he was referring to earlier was his wife, who was in labor. He drove her to the hospital stinking drunk. A few months later, I saw her at a bar, and she came up to me and asked if I was that security guy from the hospital. I said, "Yes, I work at the hospital." She then dumped her drink on my head and said, "Frick you." What the actual frick? I feel sorry for their child. Caught a burglar in my home in the middle of the night. He wasn't armed. That was the only thing that saved his life. If he was, I wouldn't have hesitated to shoot him, so I held him at gunpoint while I called the cops. We actually had a pleasant conversation and he told me a bit of his story. I ended up sending him $50 in prison so he could buy some things for himself. This was 10 years ago. A couple of years back I saw him working as a landscaper and stopped to say hi. He gave me a big hug and thanked me for the money. He even tried to pay me back. The lesson: sometimes criminals aren't bad people, they just had bad circumstances. I'm glad I didn't shoot him. I was sleeping at 3 AM in my basement room. Wake up to the sound of someone moaning in agony on the couch. The way my room is laid out I couldn't see him, so I just assumed I was hearing things and tried to go back to sleep. Didn't go away. 5 minutes later, leaned up and saw his legs and shoes. Oh, same as a friend who had been over earlier. Nope. Lean up farther, he's Hispanic. Friend is Greek. I sit there for 30 seconds and my first thought is to attack the fellow. I had a 3-inch knife on my nightstand. He hadn't noticed me. Weird room. Instead, I remember my room locks from the outside. Converted basement. I move. He hears me and chases me out of the room. I get there first and lock him in. I sprint up 2 flights of stairs to wake up my parents. I'm 15 and they just think I'm having a bad dream or something. They walk downstairs and right as they approach my room, the edge of a 10-pound weight from my room breaks through the door. Oh, there's actually a guy in there. My mum reached for the phone and called 911, while my father, with her, went up to the middle floor of the house and drew a broadsword from the mostly decorative suit of armor in the living room, and tells me to fetch the cavalry saber from the umbrella stand. Weird family. K. 5 minutes later police arrive, open the door and arrest the poor fellow, who was drugged out of his mind. PCP. Apparently he got in diving through a window. I take sleeping meds so it didn't wake me when it shattered. They inform us it's technically a citizen's arrest because of the confinement. I caught this threat too late. Oh well. I was told it's good to talk about it. It's 3 weeks past and I've had post-shock anxiety or whatnot. Thanks for reading this wall of text. Son, fetch the cavalry saber. No, not the rapier, not the Scottish claymore, damn it. The cavalry saber. Last 4th of July we were having a BBQ at my friend's house. 2 idiots on a scooter drove by and sprayed bear mace on my friend. Well, the wind blew the bear mace back at them and in confusion, they drove behind the house. I ran to block them off and ended up holding one guy by the neck until a cop tapped me on the shoulder and arrested him. Yes, successfully in Northern California. I was heading back from work late and an apparently drunk driver was swerving and speeding down the highway, passing on the shoulder and almost spun out several times. Being a concerned citizen, I followed and called the CHP. The driver pulled off the highway, took out a couple mailboxes, tore through a lawn and then corrected back on the street and turned into a cul-de-sac. I was on the phone with CHP the entire time, updating them on what was going on and with my location. Once in the cul-de-sac I stopped at the entrance as the driver sped into a lawn and stopped. About this time a squad of CHP pulled in as the guy got out of the car with what looked like a rifle. They arrested the guy, searched the vehicle and took him away. A couple hours later I received a call from the CHP asking for a citizen's arrest report as they found an epic amount of guns. CNH. It turns out the guy was a Mexican drug smuggler and this was his 3rd offense. He's doing life in prison now. Wrote this then decided it would be a good idea to register a disposable account for this story. Everyone calls these accounts throwaways but I like disposable. Also, nice job. Massive guy, built all fat strong like Bluto from Popper, had apparently been harassing a female bartender for a while. I walked into the bar just when she tried escorting him out and he quickly punched her in the face, sending her against a wall. Thin guy bravely got in front of the big drunk monster before he could continue the assault. Things did not look good for thin guy and bartender. I have no idea how to fight or wrestle, but I hopped on Bluto's back and wrapped my forearm around his neck and applied pressure to his back until he dropped to his knees. The science of that made sense to me somehow. After a while, Thin guy told me to relax my grip and that's when I realized Bluto was snoring in that ugly sounding way that only happens when someone has been knocked out. He woke up a couple of minutes later and tried thrashing around and screaming, but I had to keep holding this crazed monster until the police finally arrived. I don't know if that counts as a citizen's arrest, but I basically handed over custody to the police and they didn't ask me a single question. No we'll take it from here or anything, either. Not a word. I was sort of afraid that I'd be held accountable somehow for being part of a bar fight, but there was nothing. Got a free pitcher of beer and many questions about my martial arts training that I don't have. TL. DR choked a guy out with science. Didn't get in trouble when police arrived. Free beer. You probably weren't charged because you didn't attack him in any way. You simply defended someone else and yourself. Bit of a long one, but it's a good one. At my first year of university celebrating Halloween in residence, it got pretty crazy, later inspiring a sign and rule, and there were a lot of people there who did not look familiar. At around 12 midnight, out behind the residence we were in, 3 kids who went to a local high school pulled a Swiss Army knife on one of my buddies. There were way more of us than there were of them, so we called their bluff and they ran off. As they were running around to the front of the residence, we shout for someone to stop them. Luckily, 3 university kids happened to be out front having a smoke. One of them was dressed in full Batman costume, I'm pretty sure the real deal armor type. This university kid heard us yelling to stop the high school punks and decides to chase them down the sidewalk. Along the sidewalk was a ledge about 3 feet tall and also wide enough to run along. The Batman kid chases the high schoolers down the ledge about 50 meters before jump tackling the slowest kid to the ground. Batman kid proceeded to recite the high school kid's rights in a perfect Batman voice. Batman detained the kid and got a $50 reward. TLDR. Watched a kid who pulled a knife on me get tackled and read his rights by a near perfect Batman lookalike. $50 reward. I should buy a bat suit. Worked for Hollywood Video in college for a short bit. Horrible company to work for. Would constantly have people stealing stuff because we basically weren't allowed to do anything. One day a regular and his son were walking in and 2 kids blast by through the door loaded up with DVDs. Regular and his son turn around and tackle both of them in the parking lot and drag them back inside to us, and we dumped them behind the counter while we called the cops. So not really me completely, but sort of. I hope the guy got a discount from the non. In 1955, my uncle was a law student at Purdue. Walking home from his job as bartender one night, he saw several drunks drag a lady kicking and screaming into an alley. He followed them and saw them trying to rape her as she fought back. Not knowing what else to do, he marched into the alley, past the drunks, and placed the woman under citizen's arrest for failure to yield. He then pulled her from the incredulous drunks and marched her out of the alley into the local police station. He told the drunks to wait there as they were material witnesses to the woman's crime, and that cops would be coming to take their statements. They did. They were arrested and prosecuted. My uncle finished law school and went on to become a federal judge. 10/10 on the spot thinking. I was in the kitchen one night about 2 years ago. Lights are off, just filling up a bottle of water, when smash a brick comes through one of the front room windows and lands in the hall. Now I lived in a crappy neighborhood in London, so my initial reaction was a mix of confused as frick and angry as all heck. Thought it was some crappy kids or something. So I pick up the most usable weapon I can find. I use a wooden broom. So I head towards the front door ready to shout and frickin' threaten when I notice someone in the front room unplugging my fricking TV. Initial reaction admittedly rash. Could have just told him to frick off out my house. I walk through the door and without warning hit the back of his leg hard. Then when he fell over I kneed him in the face. Think I broke his nose, but I'm not certain. I called the police. Not sure if this counts as citizen's arrest, but I had him detained in my house for a good 20 minutes or so. My friends and I followed a drunk driver into a parking lot and I convinced her to roll down her window and talk to me while I was on the line with police. I distracted her till the Chicago police arrived, so like 30 minutes. The police took my info and a brief interview in case the event made it to court. I'm curious as to what you talked about for those 30 minutes. Several times. I worked loss prevention for a few different stores, and every time we caught a shoplifter it was considered a citizen's arrest. Have a ton of great stories I've told on here before. Had 12-year-olds attacking cops, catching an addict stealing, kid with brass knuckles once, even had a lady leave her infant behind as she ran from us. A ton of craziness. While I've never partaken in it, I have had drunk people attempt a citizen's arrest because I was friends with a guy who was in a bar fight. I was sober and addressed a police officer casually with 4 random people on my back, shoving my face into the ground. I was asking the officer what good reason he had to let this happen. His response? I didn't do it, so it's not on me. We attempted to file a complaint against said cop, but nothing happened with it. Great times. Sounds to me more like you were assaulted and should attempt to press charges on the drunks holding you down. Not so much of an arrest as I knocked the poor guy unconscious. I used to work at a grocery store and was walking in one fateful day when I was off to pick up my paycheck. As I walk through the double doors I hear commotion, screaming, and people yelling at a man to stop. Coming through the double doors was a guy a little taller than me in a thick jacket and filled baggy pants, trying to hold the jacket closed with one hand. As I happened to be in the way as he was sprinting out, he used his other arm to swing wide at me to try and knock me over. I leaned back, used my left arm to catch his arm and my right hand to jab him in the throat. He stumbled back with me still holding his arm and I stepped forward and elbowed him in the forehead, knocking him out. Police came a few minutes later, who then called some paramedics. to arrest the guy, returned all stolen merchandise, a shitload of medication to make M with before it was restricted, and baby formula, and questioned me over how he came into that condition. As it was self-defense, we had camera footage in the lobby of him attacking me first. I wasn't into much trouble with the law. Did get written up at my job though for attempting to prevent a shoplifter from leaving. I have done dozens of them, not even exaggerating. My best one was when a guy, junkie, robbed a pokies, slot machines, cashier. He took over $10,000 in a few handfuls because the cashiers had left their stations unattended. Guys on amphetamines are a lot harder to control than when sober. He was tiny and it still took someone to help me to restrain him. He punched me and spat in my face, but eventually we pinned him down and called the police. Former Walmart employee here. I worked at Walmart in high school, collecting shopping carts and all those fun jobs. One day a woman came into the store and was losing her mind because of some mix of medication and alcohol that was taken before coming into Walmart. She was throwing things around and running into things and grabbing people. The whole time I was in the parking lot, just getting my carts. Security kicked her out of the store, but the rampage wasn't over. She started jumping on cars and kicking cars, pretty much just losing it. And then she spotted me. She sorta stared at me for a minute, so I didn't really want to make any sudden movements. Then she broke off a piece of a license plate protector, those stupid frames around people license plates, and came at me. She was pretty scrawny, but drugs make you pretty fierce. Her daughter was with her, so I politely said I was going to take her mother down, because her mother was now trying to jam that sharp piece of plastic into my neck now. So as gentle as I could I grabbed her hands and kicked her feet out. Once I had her on the ground, a bystander came by and got the piece of license plate protector out of her hands. I held her down till the cops showed up, but she got a few really good kicks to my head, flexible and had a good kick. After all said and done, had to finish my shift. So I didn't really want to make any sudden movements. Here we see the raptor psycho woman in her natural habitat, trying to discern predator from prey as the young Walmart employee stands petrified, gauging whether to flee or stay and fight off her vicious attacks. I was in a Walgreens gathering some things for a day by the pool, decked out in flip-flops, swimming trunks, and an A-shirt, you know, to show off the guns. As I was making my way to the checkout, I hear an elderly woman scream and a younger kid, 1920s, dash past me carrying a purse. I start off after him, realizing halfway out of the store the flip-flops weren't going to cut it. I kicked them off and was now running full speed across burning hot asphalt after this kid. When he got to his car I was just steps away. His friends had seen me coming and had locked him out. Fearing I would stop them all, I pretty much spear tackled the kid and placed him in a rear naked choke until the police showed up. My reward? The cop telling me I should have let the police handle it and got to spend a day in court to testify against the kid. He wound up going to a great rehab facility and hopefully got his life straightened out. TLDR. Kid was stealing an old lady's purse. I tackled and restrained him. Was told I should have let the police handle it. I hate when police say you should have let the police handle it. I mean, it makes sense because you put yourself in danger. But if you hadn't done that then the kids would have probably gotten away with it considering the police weren't there to handle it. I work loss prevention, so I have to do them pretty frequently. Usually they turn out pretty good. Most people are cooperative. You get a few who will run, and very few who will try to fight. I was reporting on a story and this dude stole a $6,000 camera out of my car. I ran after him, grabbed the first thing I could get my hands on, his hair, and yanked, and then slammed his face into a streetlight. Took my camera back and turned him over to the police. I almost got charged for busting his nose too. Friend's son story. Totally forgot this story. Son was a cop and managed to get a dropout canine so he gave it to his mill. Dog was pretty chill and was a good dog. One night, a person breaks into the mill's house. She lived alone. Another reason the still gave her the dog. The dog wakes up and starts barking. She lets the dog out of the bedroom, thinking the dog had to go to the bathroom. She had no clue someone was in her house. Dog runs into the kitchen and finds the burglar and corners him. The dog is barking and basically holding the guy, not with his teeth, just barking. The guy is freaking out. The mill does not know how to get the dog to stop pinning the guy. She presses the panic button on her alarm system and the cops call. She says she has an intruder and her dog is holding him. The then calls her Bill. Bill can hear the dog barking in the background and asks what is up. Other than being around 2 AM, Mill wants to call off the dog, but the Bill says no, not until the cops come. Mill did not know the command to call off the dog. Here did not work. Bill won't tell her the word till she confirms the cops are there. Cops get there. Bill tells the Mill the command. She actually had to grab the dog and tell him or/s. Cops get the burglar and take him away. So the canine dropout earned his keep. Story was from a friend that owned a sire used from breeding high drive police dogs. I was in a situation in which a drunk guy told a worker at a late night eatery that I stole something. The worker confronted me about it by putting his hands on me. I felt threatened, physically defended myself, and I booked out of there. The drunk guy chased me and tried to citizens arrest me. The cops came and searched my apartment to find nothing. They still gave me a theft citation. Went to court and the citizen's arrest was thrown out because the way he did it resulted in a violation of Miranda. Current suit against the eatery and the employee for battery along with the drunk that chased me down for assault. Long story short, use your eyes and words before placing your hands on someone. Security guard here in one of the worst areas of Toronto. I have had to make many. Most recently one guy for throwing a rock at my partner because he blames my company for ruining his life. I was the manager at a Domino's pizza store and one night one of the driver's cars was broken into and a few CDs and an emergency rain poncho was stolen. This all happened in the back car park, and when we reviewed the CCTV footage of the rear exit we saw the bloke creep past and drop something, which turned out to be the poncho. We called the police, but one of the drivers who was well trained in martial arts was finishing and said he would have a look for the guy himself as the cops wouldn't be able to do anything. Anyway, half an hour later he comes back with the guy from the CCTV footage. We all crap ourselves, but he leads him into the mop closet where there was a sink, and then bars him in there by just standing in the way. He explains he found the guy lurking behind some other shops, and the thief explained he was called out to fix someone's tap but wasn't sure which shop, and so told him we needed our mop sink fixed and would pay him $50. Anyway, I call the police freaking out that some crazy crap could happen on my watch, and they come in the next few minutes. Check out the CCTV footage while we all watch and then read the guy his rights right in front of us. Good times. TL. DR. Pizza delivery guy tracks down thief and lures him back to the store and keep him there while the police come. Just read in the paper that a man in Clyde, NY bought a house next door to his own for his father-in-law and was in the process of fixing it up when some kids broke into it and vandalized it. His wife had told them to leave earlier in the day when she found them in there. They came back and beat holes in the walls with a hammer and painted graffiti that was derogatory to women on the walls. They were ages 8 to 10 and there were 4 of them. The man caught them in the midst of the vandalism and took their hammer and told them to go into a closet until police got there, because he didn't want them to escape. The police were on their way, so it wasn't like they were left in there for days either. The damage they did totaled over $40,000. So of course the homeowner was charged with 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. I don't know how sticking the little buttholes in a closet endangered them. Also, the father of 2 of the brat admits his kids were some of the ones that did the damage, but said the homeowner grabbed one boy by the neck and it had traumatized them. So I guess there'll be a lawsuit or something against the homeowner? WTF. So I guess you can only do a citizen's arrest as long as you don't detain them in any way. The crappy thing is that the legal system is so flawed and bent in certain cases that nothing can be done quickly and righteously. Endangering the welfare of a child should be the counts directed at the kids for being stupid and endangering each other's well-being. A number of years ago, my friend's dad stopped a car full of teenagers who were speeding and driving dangerously through a residential area. He waited around a corner, the kids were driving aimlessly, and essentially blocked them off. Walked to the driver's side and took the keys from the ignition. He then called the cops and waited for their arrival while the kids begged for mercy. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.